Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Europa Rediviva. Yesterday, in the earlier hours of the morning, a Russian drone struck Galați, my hometown. There are a lot of things to be said about this. First of all, this is part of a continuous escalation process started a couple of years ago with so-called drone incidents over Romania. What is particular in the case of Romania, as opposed to Poland and the Baltic countries, was that there was linearity in these events. So if in Poland and the Baltic countries there were all sorts of incidents involving rockets and drones from the Ukraine theater, stray drones that hit things that are deemed to be Russian or Ukrainian, missiles that hit people, that kill people, like it was in Poland with two people on a tractor on a farm on the border with Ukraine. They were killed, and subsequently it was determined that it was an act of the Ukrainian anti-air defense. It was killed they were killed by a Ukrainian anti-air defense missile. In the Baltics, we've had these drone incursion events, and subsequently they were deemed to be Ukrainian. The Romanian pilot that downed a drone in Estonia downed the Ukrainian drone. So there were no such processes of linearity as it is in the case of Romania. In the case of Romania, first, there were rumors that Russian drones might have come over the territory of Romania. Then there were rumors that drones might have crashed on the territory of Romania, of course, Russian drones. Then some Russian drone wreckage was found in an uninhabited place close to the border with Ukraine. Subsequently, some drones fell and were found in some inhabited place, but in some courtyards of some abandoned houses. Then some drones went further into the territory of Romania, allegedly explored two counties before turning back. Then some drones veered also into Romania and then landed in some courtyards without creating any damage. Then last month, in February, I think, in April. In April, some drone fell in Galați, on an annex at the edge of Galați, also with a bit of property damage, but with no victims. Now a drone crashed into an apartment building and exploded and hurt two people, put them in hospital. So there is this crescendo. It's hard not to notice it. And if we continue the line, the next incident will also involve Galați or perhaps Tulcea, but Galați is the bigger city. We are now at the level of cities of 300,000 people. So the next incident probably involves a drone or several drones with much more explosive hitting an apartment building and destroying it altogether, making casualties, not just creating not only injuries but even fatalities, unfortunately. If this escalation continues, then this is what I expect. The problem is, of course, the entire Western press and the Romanian authorities run with the story that it was a Russian attack. I'm not sure what the incentive of Russia is to draw NATO into the conflict. Why would Russia attack a NATO country? Why would it attack it surreptitiously without admitting it, but at the same time to stoke military preparations, to increase support for Ukraine? And of course, if such attacks continue, if the next attack will involve victims, will involve fatalities, the war fervor in Romania will become even greater, and Romania will start militarizing. I mean, it is already militarizing, but maybe it will start conscription. Maybe it will send troops to Ukraine. Maybe it will send air defense to Ukraine, and maybe it will do this type of military policing by fighter jets, so as to take down Ukrainian drones on the territory of Ukraine. I don't know. But it's hard not to see the pattern of escalation. And once you see it, who do you ascribe it to? Do you ascribe it to Russia? Why? Why does Russia have the interest to drag NATO into the war? I don't know. Maybe it does have. Maybe Russia does have the interest to drag NATO into the war, but it's just a bit shy to do it outright, and so it's doing it through these provocations so as to ensure a response. Maybe. I don't know. I would say that somebody else has an interest in escalating the war and in drawing other countries into it, not the country against which these other countries would fight. So I would say in the two parties in the war, it's Russia that has the least incentive to draw other allies of its adversary, I would say. I don't know, but that's just me. That's just faulty logic. But anyway, the process is inescapable in my opinion. I've said it before. I've said it on some Romanian language podcasts which I attended before, when I was living in Romania and when I was involving myself in the Romanian language space. I no longer wish to do that because of this war psychosis, and because there's this tendency to equate voices which try to reason what's going on to agents of Russia. So basically now there's this conflation. Anybody who wants to stop the war escalation, is automatically deemed a Russian agent, and therefore, yeah, when you conflate peace activists, just like who said it? Was it Goebbels? That you denounce peacemakers, you denounce the peace activists as traitors. That's the way to go in order to ensure full compliance in the population for war. If the population is war skeptic, like any population, nobody wants to go to war. But how do you ensure conformity? Well, you just say that all the people who want peace are traitors, and you solve the issue. And this is what's going on now. Basically, anybody who's saying that it's not exactly the logical thing to do, the reasonable path to pursue, the path of escalation, they are deemed officially agents of Russian disinformation, and this cannot be escaped, unfortunately. So this is why I left Romania. This is why I'm no longer speaking in Romanian, and I will continue to not do so. There's this war fervor and war logic that Matthias Desmet has spoken about. During the pandemic, it was about punishing the unvaccinated, and now it is about punishing the peacemakers. It is a form of mass formation, so it is a manifestation of group psychology in which the people who articulate a political position are generally part of this mass. In Romania, they're part of this segment of radicals who do not acknowledge explicitly that the end point is to actually have a war with Russia. They would not acknowledge it overtly. But every step that they make and every premise that they hold dear leads to that outcome. This is why I'm saying it's an inescapable logic. The premises that they hold are that Russia is inherently evil, Russia is this monster, and that Russia is inherently expansionist, and that Russia will just invade any Western country. I don't know why only Western, but yeah. It will invade any Western country, and that's why it's better to send troops to the east to fight them rather than to wait for them to come and to have to defend our own border. This is the logic. These are the premises. They are not discussable. It's not possible to relativize them. If you relativize them, then you're obviously a Putin agent and a Putin puppet. So things will just take their course. Even though this segment of radicalized people is a minority in Romanian society, the majority is not organized and cannot be organized for a wide variety of reasons. The best way to organize them probably was with Călin Georgescu, and that was deemed unacceptable by the system, and the elections were annulled. So the majority has no way of imposing its will, even though this is how a democracy should function. It is the politically active minority that imposes its will through constant pressure, through constant outrage. Just like during the vaccine crusade, it was this cycle of escalation. The media would create this hysteria regarding how full the hospitals are, and then the agents of discourse from this politically active minority in Romania would start shouting, advocating for tougher measures, and the policymakers had to respond. Not responding is not an option. If you function in a democracy, you have this flaw that you are susceptible to public opinion, and public opinion is not the opinion of the majority. Public opinion is what comes across as the opinion of the class of people who can have their political preferences stated and enforced in the public discourse. The public discourse is not the discourse of the majority. It is the public discourse of the politically active. And that politically active segment of Romanian society is made up of the managerial class, people who have higher education, who work in institutions. And if you align 10 talking heads, 10 so-called public intellectuals, be them journalists, public philosophers, whatever, if you align 10 of them in the same direction, you get conformity from 30% of the population. You get 1/3 of the Romanian population aligning up to whatever these people said, because 1/3 of the Romanian population lines up mimetically to what they consider messages coming from the zone of prestige. They consider themselves intellectuals, not because they think for themselves, but because they belong to the upper class, and or they have aspirations towards the upper class, and therefore they take without processing any kind of message coming from people like well-known intellectual figures who are aligned with the messages of the US Embassy, and who have been aligned with these messages since the 1990s, when they were advocating for the war against Yugoslavia and stuff like this. So basically there are these so-called public intellectuals who have always supported the line of the United States, who have received, of course, ample grants from the United States and then from the European Commission. And if you get 10 of them to line up, everybody else will just line up. And there is no way to step out of line, because you will immediately be labeled. In the 2018-2019 mass psychosis against corruption, you were labeled as being paid by the corrupts, by the corrupt elements of Romanian society and by the Social Democrats. In 2020-2021, you were labeled an anti-vaxxer, anti-science, anti-this, anti-that, and illiterate and uneducated and whatever. And with the war in Ukraine, you are basically labeled a Russian agent. And once you get labeled, it's kind of a circular logic, because whatever you say in the public space gets automatically labeled as Russian disinformation because it comes from your mouth. For example, there was this exercise this conference under the tutelage of the presidency of Romania, in which just casually these so-called disinformation experts said that the topics of disinformation in Romania are, and they essentially listed all the problems that Romanian society currently faces: the inflation, the big deficit. They essentially equated any kind of dissenting opinion, any kind of protest, any kind of grief, any kind of problem that Romanians legitimately express with disinformation, because the underlying premise is that Russia uses grievances from the internal environment of that country in order to increase polarization, in order to create dissent and so on. So essentially any grievance that the population might have is liable to be used by the Russian Federation in its propaganda efforts to create unrest, and therefore any grievance is part of Russian propaganda, even though it has nothing to do with Russia. I mean, people who complain about inflation do not say anything about Russia in the same sentence, do not say Russia has less inflation or something. It's just that people complain about inflation. Yeah, but you know who benefits from complaining about inflation? Russia. So you better stop complaining about inflation, because then the devil wins. Who is the father of the lie? Who is the father of disinformation? Putin. So, and this is why in such an atmosphere with such an internal logic, it is impossible to broadcast any kind of messages trying to instill some doubt in this narrative, to try to show where the final end point of this chain of thought will be. Because now, of course, people are advocating for measures, people from this politically active class, the intellectuals, advocating for measures. They're berating the president and they're berating the government for being too slow, for doing too little. And they're not saying that the end point is to have war with Russia, because that would be suicidal, and they would also admit, if you ask them to give an honest impression, they also do not believe that Moscow can be conquered and that Russia can be broken up in statelets and whatever, what the initial plan was. They also admit that it's kind of suicidal. But how do you convince people to commit suicide, to collectively commit suicide? Well, you have to tell them that they have no other choice, that it's inevitable, that at some point there will be a military confrontation, so maybe better sooner than later. Then you also have to tell them that the other side is inherently evil, therefore you cannot communicate with evil, there's nothing to negotiate about, it's treason to negotiate with evil, and so on. And so basically, by eliminating any other alternatives, they leave open only the path towards confrontation. And I don't think this can be escaped. I don't think it is possible to articulate any kind of dissenting opinion in Romania anymore, because measures will be taken. Putin and the Kremlin officials cannot be punished by Romania, at least not at this point. But domestic opposition surely can be punished, and it can be a way of blowing off steam, of venting some frustration. This also happened during the vaccine crusade. So because the vaccine was not working, it was not preventing transmission and it was not preventing infections, they turned against the unvaccinated, because they had to find a scapegoat and they had to punish some segment of society in a Girardian way. If you want to read more about scapegoating, read this French anthropologist René Girard. He pointed it out quite early on, and then some people took it on for what was going on during the pandemic. And my personal experience is that you cannot talk to the people. You cannot talk to the people that you hope might be able to change track, because they are part of this mass formation. They immediately label you, they immediately call you names, and they immediately think that they are talking to a Putin propagandist and to a Russian agent, because there is no alternative to this moral indignation that has it as practical effects escalation towards war. There is no alternative to this path. If you try to say that the end point is not exactly a desirable one, and therefore we should find a different path that leads to a different end point, you are relativizing crimes. Basically, the propaganda machine managed to instill in these 4 years such a skewed image of the international system And it managed to persuade the so-called educated public, so the people who read the news and believe them, the fact that what's going on is a moral question, and we are on the side of the good. We are on the moral side. The side of the United States is, of course, the side of the good, and all of America's enemies on the whole globe are the bad, and we have to side with the good. And we're not only siding with the good. The bad are so hideously bad, this is what people were convinced, that they are just morally disgusting. So when you try to advocate that maybe this regime or that regime or the other country or that country, when you try to advocate that maybe daddy's enemies are also, human, and they're also like independent countries that have a right to exist and have a right to do whatever they want in their internal affairs, you get this reaction from the other side, this reaction of moral disgust, which is just like physical disgust. They do not have the proper pathways ready to engage in rational dialogue. No, it goes straight to the, I don't know what's the amygdala or something, that part of the brain that processes disgust, and basically you tell them something about, I don't know, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, Syria, I don't know, about some of these countries. You tell them a sentence about somehow in defense of the regime there, and their primal reaction is that of disgust. They almost throw up, and they look at you as if you were eating dead animals, essentially. So dialogue is not rational, and then they respond if they if they somehow appreciate you as a person, and they do not disregard dialogue altogether. They respond, but they respond with such a morally charged and psychologically charged answer, as if you had proposed to them to go to the cemetery and eat dead bodies, something like this. Just something like "how dare you," or something, some indignation that you might even consider the position of the enemy, whatever. So when we are in this inescapable logic, and this, what I'm saying, happens also with people who know you. So people who have known you for a while, people who trust your thinking in other respects, people who believe that you're not exactly an imbecile, but because the propaganda worked for so long to instill this kind of disgust in people, it's no longer possible to argue anything. So the only answer you can get from the fanaticized part of the population is, okay, we found the baby killer. Here he is. Here's the baby killer. Here's the genocidal maniac. Pointing fingers towards you and inviting the rest to lynch you, essentially. So we are kind of in this medieval hysteria phase, even though we live in the 21st century and we allegedly are sophisticated and educated and everything. The propaganda made sure to reduce us to these beings that function on hysteria, and our mass psychosis is instrumentalized in order to make us do something that rationally we would not do. We would not rationally accept to go and commit suicide by waging war against the biggest military power of the planet. We would not consciously and rationally do that. But under the spell of indignation, of moral outrage, of hysteria, and of course of hysteria, which builds up more and more. So as I said, perhaps in the next attack there will be casualties, there will be fatalities. How can you open your mouth afterwards? All the hyped up people, all the hysterical people will probably carry around the pictures of the dead, and they will say, you spit on their pictures, you spit on their memory, you did it, you kill people, and so on. During the vaccine crusade, because I did not want to take the vaccine, friends of mine, people close to me, friends, former friends, but anyway, people whom I considered close and who I also considered rational, called me a murderer because I did not want to take the experimental genetic therapy, which also proved to not work in what it said it would work. So when you have this kind of it's kind of like a sect, but I think a sect is even more rational than what we have. We have basically a hysterical mob, a medieval type of hysterical mob, which functions according to mass psychology. It functions according to Gustave Le Bon. It does not function as they do not function as rational individuals. They function as a lynch mob. So good luck trying to argue with a lynch mob. This is why I came to the conclusion some time ago that I need to leave Romania. I need to stop expressing my opinions in the Romanian language sphere so as to not be pointed at as the enemy within, as is now the case, as is now in fashion to do. And unfortunately, the chain of events that I had in mind with these types of escalations creating public hysteria is unfortunately unfolding. So my advice to, and I've also expressed this in private to people that still consider me a friend, so people that I can still talk to, I have advised everybody in Romania that I could until now to try to keep a low profile and to stop expressing political opinions publicly, because the space for doing that has kind of closed. So the window of opportunity for trying to turn the tide and for trying to do some sort of opposition has passed. The window has closed. I think it closed when the elections were annulled and Călin Georgescu was not allowed to run anymore. And ever since then, I've kind of been proven right. So my expectation is that things will continue to unfold in this direction. Every point of escalation leads to a new hysteria and leads to new war measures being enacted. And those war measures would have been controversial had they been enacted without these events. Right, so we had the drone incident, and the next night the SAFE program was signed, even though it was under negotiation. Whatever. Now there's no more negotiation; it's just action. So probably Romania is being goaded slowly to move into the trenches, and perhaps some measures are deemed controversial now. Perhaps. If Romania reinstates conscription and reinstates mandatory military service, it would seem as a big step now. But with the next escalation, in case also fatalities will be involved, then Romania will be prepared. The Romanian public will be prepared to enlist, to sign up for military service and so on. So yeah, this is my analogy. It's like the metaphor of the frog, the boiling frog. You boil the frog at low speed so that the frog doesn't jump out of the pot. If you throw the frog into boiling water directly, it might jump out. It might get scared and its vital instincts kick in and it might jump out. But if you boil the frog slowly, then its conservation instinct never kicks in. So it never jumps out. It just accustoms itself more and more to the rising temperature. And one of the consequences of this rising temperature is also the impossibility to contest the path on which we are on. We are on a trajectory that has as endpoint military confrontation with Russia. I think it's hard to disagree. So, and we are being kept on this path through such incidents. Allegedly, this path serves Russia. I don't know, maybe. I'm open to this idea. Also, the Russians have said in the past weeks that they will attack NATO countries because it's no longer possible to keep the conflict only within Ukraine because the European countries are too involved. So Russia said it might do it. Maybe Russia is behind this escalation. I don't know. I have no idea what strategy they employ in the Kremlin. It could be. But I think the end point, so to have war with Russia is a very bad thing. I'm sure that the majority of the Romanian population agrees with me. However, things can no longer be stopped. If the possibility had been there to stop the train, it would have been available years ago, maybe months ago, at most months ago. But now it's no longer possible to stop the train. So you can take my advice for what you think of it. My opinion is that if you have dissenting opinions in Romania right now, it's better to keep them for yourself, because you will be labeled and measures will be enacted against you. I am 100% sure. Because it's the easiest thing to do, right? If you have political pressure on from the civil society to escalate and to do things, it's hard to escalate against a country that's not even your neighbor. But to escalate against your own domestic population, against the dissenting elements of your own population, that's doable. And if it worked during the vaccine crusade, I'm pretty sure it can be enacted during the war hysteria. So this is what I wanted to tell you. Stay safe. Don't do stupid things. If you like what I do, like, share, subscribe. And if you want to support me financially, you'll find the link in the description of the channel how to do so. Until next time, take care.